Welcome back to Big T's Chop Shop. This is episode 2 of our Versabuilt MultiGrip series. What I'm focusing on today is the hardware installation. So basically what's involved in getting the Versabuilt MultiGrip FJ Gripper mounted onto the ZA6 Robot and getting the Vise mounted onto the Tormach 1100. It's a pretty straightforward process and everything went together well, but I did learn a few things along the way. So hopefully I can save you a bit of time when you go to do your installation. Let's check it out. All right, next step here is that we need to replace the built-in default flange here on the end of the robot arm with the Tormach adapter for the Versabuilt FJ Gripper and then the mounting plate for the FJ Gripper itself. So I'm going to base this on the install video from Versabuilt. They were installing on a universal robotics arm in that. I'm going to mimic the same process. So right now basically I have the Tormach arm at rest at 000. I've e-stopped it so that the arm can't move while I work on it. And we're going to first install the flange, then install the bracket for the FJ Gripper and the FJ Gripper itself. In terms of our installation here, the kit seems to have come with pretty much everything I need. There are hex keys as well as the flange and everything required here. So we're just going to go ahead and mount up the adapter first. Okay, now with all the bolts loosely installed, I'm going to go and do a tightening pattern here where we kind of crisscross our way around the bolts on the flange, make sure everything's tightened up. And that should be it. So now we have our adapter plate installed. Next piece we need to install is the bracket to mount the Versabuilt MultiGrip Gripper. You'll notice that there's a locating pin on the top of it that lines up with the hole in the adapter flange. So basically you just get that lined up at top dead center with the arm in the default position. Gonna loosely put in these bolts and then use a 5mm hex driver to tighten them up. Next component is the gripper itself. So it fits onto the 4 mounting points on the adapter bracket. Very straightforward. Basically these bolts just go through there and bolt it on. Be careful because it kind of comes apart there with the bolts out. So bolts need to go right through and into the main gripper body. So we tighten those up there a little bit, just get them snugged in. We'll grab our 4mm hex key and those tighten up. We'll snug those down so they're nice and firm. Perfect. So we have our FJ Gripper mounted up and we're ready to hook up the pneumatics and get the lines run for the plumbing. Okay, so final step in the process for the FJ Gripper is going to be for us to basically set up these pneumatic tubes in such a way that the gripper can still maintain its degrees of freedom and rotation, and these tubes are not in the way. Now, I'm a little worried that this is a bit excessively long based on the way that these tubes are going to feed down through the ZA6 conduit, but obviously they're just pneumatic tubes. We can always clip them and adjust them, but not going to cut anything before we make sure that everything works and that we've got enough length. Always easier to make something shorter than it is to make it longer. So we're going to feed these through. So I'm finding that they really want to get caught on the inside of the tube. That's a bit of a problem. There's definitely some pretty tight turns to make here in the conduit tube. So if I give it a little push here and there, it seems to move forward to the next step, but that's tricky. Okay, so I tried a few different things. Unfortunately, the only strategy that really seemed to work for feeding the tube here was to unclip it fully from the robot. Now, not a big deal. Those are quick release clips, but it's definitely worth noting that this is not a trivial process here. So we'll fight with this and get it done, and then get back once we have this thing put back together. So bottom line is, not trivial to feed this through the conduit, but we'll get her done. So with everything plumbed in, obviously we've got a little bit of slack here, which is good. We need that for the gripper to be able to rotate and have its full degrees of freedom without tangling on the pneumatics. The one little innovation that I came up with was basically to just make a little plastic tab. I just cut it out of a spare piece of shim stock that let me hang the extra pneumatic tube off of this spare mount point that we have on the robot. You know, nothing too fancy there, but it helps keep things out of the way without restricting the degrees of freedom of rotation. So very simple, just used a little tab and a little bolt there to screw this into the side of the robot and keep the lines out of the way. Also, because it's fairly lightweight shim stock, if we did manage to hook these on something or you know, got tangled up, I would imagine it would just rip away and not cause any damage. So that's sort of our finished up mounting for the FJ Gripper, and we'll move on to the Vise next. Okay, so last piece of the process is to get the Versabuilt Vise mounted onto our CNC bed. The process of mounting the pneumatic vise is basically identical to any other CNC work holding vise or tool that you might be familiar with. Versabuilt in their instructional videos use the front of the vise for indicating. We're going to follow the same procedure, obviously with the top jaws and whatnot. Maybe there'll be a surface that we indicate onto later on, but for now we'll follow that process and get this mounted up. Okay, so Versabuilt provides T-nuts and mounting accessories, mounting bolts for the vise. We're just using the hardware they provided. One thing I'm a little wary of, you may need to close the piston in order to be able to mount the vise. So we'll do that in just a second. We'll start with this side. Okay. So I generally start with one side fairly firmly positioned, and then the other side free so that I can use it as a pivot point, and we'll sweep that face. First of all, let's close the vise. Great, so with the vise closed, we'll have access to that bolt. Very loosely tighten that down so that it's easy for us to adjust and commence the process of sweeping this in. So we've got it all trimmed in now, mounted down firmly on the bed, and our Versabuilt Vise is ready for action. Awesome, so that really wasn't too bad. Basically, we went through the process of setting up the FJ gripper, dealt with the tricky routing on the pneumatic tubes, and got the vise squared up on the table, so we're ready to go. So next time around, what I'm gonna cover is basically how to zero up the robot, get the robot to pick up the jaws from the vise, and the sequence of events that happens. There's a fairly intricate series of movements and motions that are required to get the vise jaws on and off of the Versabuilt vise. So we'll take a stab at programming up an initial version of those, take a look at the code that Tormach provided for doing that, and see if we can get the foundations of a pick and place process running. But thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episodes, and any comments or questions, don't hesitate to put them in down below. Thank you.